welcome to my Harris versus Trump spring prediction. So let's start. And there we go, so let's start for the likely states. So first off, let's go and talk about Texas. So for Texas, it's of course going to be a likely state. I think that Donald Trump does in fact do better than 2020, of course. I think against Harris, it would be kind of close to safe territory. I think it's probably around 10 to 12%. I think he just narrowly misses on it being a safe state, of course. Well, Florida, I think it's going to be between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. I think Donald Trump wins this state by a margin of 7 to 9%, I think. I think Texas, of course, will vote to the right of it. So for the likely states for the Democrats, in the Northeast, let's start. So Delaware, New Jersey, and Connecticut, all these three. If Kamala Harris is actually the nominee, they would suffer a big issue with turnout, and I think, even though Donald Trump wouldn't have insane amount of higher turnout if Harris is the nominee, it's just the main issue is that the Democrats wouldn't really turn out for Harris, especially than independents that voted in 2020 and 2016. So New Jersey, Connecticut, and Delaware drop from the safe status. So for Oregon, I think that it narrowly goes from a safe state to a likely state. I think in this scenario, it goes down to, if I have to guess, probably like 10%, 9 to 11% in my opinion. I think it of course will vote for the Democrats. There's no way that I see somehow the GOP win this state in 2024. And yeah, well, for Washington, I was debating on where Washington would fall in this scenario. So I think if Harris is the nominee, man, I just don't have high hopes for her. Even though she might be the vice president, she really would have a problem with turnout, and I see Washington narrowly missing out on being a safe state. I think it's going to be around probably like 11.5% in this scenario. So for the next likely states, so for the state of Illinois, I think that if we saw back in, let's go to 2016, 17.1, and interesting in a way, it narrowly voted to the right in 2020. And I think that in a bad environment, in a bad national environment, where the Democrats are underwater and even more underwater, if they nominate Kamala Harris, I think that Illinois would vote to the right of 2020 by around 6%. I think it would go, of course, with the Democrats, but by a likely margin in this scenario. So for the next state, Colorado, I mean, it's trending to the left quite a lot. I think it would be one of those states that weirdly, even with the national environment favoring the GOP, wouldn't have a big shift to the right in 2024, I think. In this matchup, I think Colorado would really not drop that much. I think it would be 7 to 9%, so not a big drop off, but still a win for the Democrats here. So for the next likely state, let's go to North Carolina. So as many of you know, even though Kamala Harris might have a better appeal with African Americans, I think she would lose the suburbs and other rural areas that Joe Biden was able to appeal in 2020, and I see North Carolina voting to the right of 2020, of course, and I think it narrowly votes by a likely margin in this election. I would say probably around 5 to 7%. And yeah, that's it for the likely states. So as you can see, Harris has 191, while Donald Trump has 235. As I was saying for the following states, so I'm gonna start off with one of the most interesting ones. So Arizona. You could, in all honesty, could make a case that it would vote by a likely margin. I think Arizona is one of those states that, under the right circumstances, it can flip, as you saw and we saw in 2020 could flip. But under a normal scenario or an opposite scenario for the Democrats, you could very well see it come back to not necessarily like 2012 levels, but something like, I don't know, like a combination of 2016 and 2020. So I think that in 2024, between Harris and Donald Trump, I think that Donald Trump wins here decisively by a decent margin of, I'd say, 3 to 5% against Harris. Against Joe Biden, Donald Trump wouldn't do as well in Arizona, but against someone like Harris, he wins here easily. And now for the following state, the neighboring state of Arizona and New Mexico. So I think that in 2024 it has a really decent chance of voting to the right of 2020, and I expect for it to vote by a decent margin for the Democrats still. But in this scenario, I think that Harris doesn't really get the turnout with Hispanics. I think, I could see the Hispanic vote, either narrowly voting for the Democrats or even narrowly going for Donald Trump. But it's probably going to go for Kamala Harris by a margin of 50% to 55%. And that would affect, that drop-off from 2020 and 2016 would be massive in the Sun Belt. And I see Harris winning the state of New Mexico, kind of like Arizona by 3 to 5%, the opposite states to each other. So before I move on to other states, I think I need to talk about Virginia. So I truly think that Virginia is going to be one of those states that, it's going to be interesting to look out for in 2024 and in the future, whether it moves to the left or the right. So I think in this matchup between a former president, Donald Trump, and current vice president, Kamala Harris, Virginia votes to the right of 2020, and kind of similar to 2016, it votes for the Democrats still, but by a lean margin. I think that it votes for Kamala Harris by a margin similar to New Mexico and Arizona. All these states are kind of similar margin-wise by 3 to 5%. I just don't see a way in which Donald Trump would be able to win the states in 2024. I think it would drop massively, would hurt state politicians by a lot. So for the next states, we gotta talk about the Rust Belt. So first of all, Wisconsin. I have heard some people put it as likely, but I think that's a bit of jumping over the gun. But I think that Donald Trump wins the state of Wisconsin by a lean margin of 3 to 5%. So I think that any really decent politicians who are either A, B, or C plus level can defeat Harris, which is why I see Donald Trump getting the same turnout that he got in 2020. But in the Rust Belt, Harris doesn't get the turnout at all and gets 2016 levels, but even worse due to the economy and everything, approval-wise, being bad for Biden. And I think that Donald Trump wins the state of Wisconsin by, I could say 4 to 6%, but I'm gonna keep it as lean for now. Well, for the state of Pennsylvania, as many of you know, it went to Joe Biden by not a decent margin, by a slim margin of 1.17%. And I think that with Joe Biden not on the ticket, you would see it kind of go back to 2016 levels, but due to how underwater the Biden administration is, I think that Donald Trump wins the state by not as much as Wisconsin, but I would guess 3 to 5%, as I've said before, but which is kind of normal for lean states. So for the state of Michigan, you could make a case that it would go only by a tilt margin, which it could very well go by. Whether it's against Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, it could happen. But I think that Harris, even though she gets some turnout within, minorities, I think that Donald Trump is just gonna have the same super fans that will vote for him no matter the cost in 2024. And I just don't see any Democrats at the moment having a fan base that loyal to him winning the state of Michigan by a margin of probably around 1 to 3%. And for the final lean state, I think that, Georgia could very well be a tilt state in this scenario, but I see Donald Trump doing better than in 2020, and he wins the state of Georgia narrowly by a margin of 1 to 3%. I think Harris doesn't do as well as, Joe Biden. I think, what would be the biggest part that would hurt her would be the rural areas voting for Donald Trump by extremely heavy margins. Not as bad as it was for the GOP back in 2020. And yeah, that's it for the lean states. So let's go to the tilt states. And this election, I think that Nevada would be extremely close. I think it could either go for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris in this election, but I see Donald Trump winning the state of Nevada by a tilt margin. I do agree that Latinos are moving to the right, but bear in mind that Latinos mostly in the Southwest are of Mexican ancestry, which do tend to vote Democrats, so you're not going to have a lot of turnout for the GOP. But still, what really gets Trump the win in Nevada is the fact that Harris' turnout is just abysmal, and Donald Trump wins here by 0.75%, in my opinion. So for the next state, let's go to Minnesota first. So Minnesota narrowly goes for Kamala Harris by a tilt margin. The fact that it's even this close, it's really how down bad in the approval polls and approval-wise that Democrats are. I think that she does even worse than Clinton did in the Rust Belt, which is really telling. I think Kamala Harris wins the state of Minnesota by a tilt margin of probably like 0.5%, but if she runs a horrible campaign like Hillary Clinton and becomes a Clinton 2.0, then I wouldn't even be surprised if Trump wins the state, in all honesty. I just don't have a lot of hope for Kamala Harris. I think that Donald Trump is going to easily win against her. So for the next and following states, so I'm going to briefly talk about the 2nd district of Nebraska. It's really an issue of turnout in this district. Harris would simply not get the turnout that Biden got in 2020, and it just barely flipped for Donald Trump, narrowly. I'd guess 0.5%, and for the district of Maine, I think Donald Trump does in fact narrowly win Maine at large, something that he was not able to win against Hillary Clinton. So I think that Clinton won it by 2.9, and Harris simply doesn't even have the positives that Clinton had back in 2016. Clinton had a lot of negatives, but even then, Harris is really not looking that good at the moment. So Trump wins Maine at large, narrowly by 0.25%. Well, for New Hampshire, I think Donald Trump wins this state, I think by a tilt margin. I think it would be one of those high tilt margins in this election, and I think Donald Trump wins New Hampshire just because of lower turnout by the Democrats by 0.75%, in my opinion. And as you can see, Donald Trump wins with 319 electoral votes against Kamala Harris, 219 electoral votes. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next video.